Welcome to this edition of the Dad Jokes Explained episode. My name is Graeme Klass and I'm the producer of the Daily Dad Jokes podcast. Each week we examine a set of dad jokes and explain what makes them so funny. Our aim is to arm you with information on delivering your own dad jokes to your friends and family, so you can further spread the laughs and groans. Let's get to it.
When I came home from work, my wife said, "Uck, the baby has been crying for hours. Can you take over?" I said sure, and started crying for hours.
The humor in this joke arises from the play on words and the unexpected twist of interpretation. When the wife asks her husband to take over, she is implying that he should take care of their crying baby. However, he deliberately misinterprets her statement as a directive for him to start crying himself, hence his response sure, followed by him beginning to cry for hours. This type of humor is known as linguistic ambiguity, where a phrase or sentence can be interpreted in more than one way due to its structure or wording. In this case, it's about how we understand taking over, either taking responsibility or mimicking an action. Furthermore, there's also an element of absurdity involved which adds another layer to the punchline. Instead of soothing their child like we would expect any parent would do when asked such question by his spouse after coming home from work, our nerdy dad here takes on quite literally what seems like an emotionally draining task, crying, with such nonchalance, adding surprise and making it even funnier.
My son told me a girl at his school named IKEA had to change her name to stop being picked on. I respond, "Stop being picked on is arguably a worse name."
The humor in this joke comes from the unexpected twist and misdirection. When the son says that a girl named IKEA had to change her name, we are led to believe that she changed it to something more common or less likely to be made fun of. However, when a dad responds with "stop being picked on is arguably a worse name," he subverts our expectations by suggesting an entirely different interpretation. He treats "to stop being picked on" as if it's actually the new chosen name for this girl, which is clearly absurd and even more unusual than IKEA. This humorous effect relies heavily upon syntactic ambiguity, where phrases can have multiple interpretations depending upon how they are parsed or understood within their contexts.
I don't like John candy. Okay, technically they're called urinal mints, but still they taste horrible.
The humor in this joke lies primarily in the startling revelation at the end, which also serves as a clever twist. Initially, when we hear "I don't like John candy," we're led to think that it's about disliking an actor. However, with the second part of the sentence, "okay, technically they are called urinal mints," there is an unexpected shift. Instead of being about any typical candy or person named John Candy that one might imagine initially, it becomes clear that what's being referred to here are actually deodorizing tablets used in men's restrooms. Then comes another surprise, but still they taste horrible. This statement implies shockingly and absurdly enough that our speaker has tasted these hygiene products, something no sane individual would do given their purpose and placement. It's this sudden realization coupled with its bizarre imagery which makes us laugh. This kind of humor relies on both misdirection, where you're led down one path only for things to take an abrupt turn, and incongruity theory, which suggests laughter arises when logical expectations are violated. Herein lies its comedic value, not just from linguistic ambiguity but also from defying social norms drastically by implying consumption of such unlikely items.
Bruce Lee had an even faster brother. Suddenly.
The humor in this joke is derived from a pun, which is a form of word play that exploits multiple meanings of a term for an intended humorous or rhetorical effect. The name "suddenly" sounds very similar to the phrase "suddenly," but it's also structured like an Asian name, just like Bruce Lee's. The setup introduces the idea that Bruce Lee had an even faster brother. We know that Bruce Lee was famous for his incredible speed and agility in martial arts, so we naturally expect some sort of comparison relating to martial arts skills or physical abilities. However, instead of providing such comparison, the punchline unexpectedly presents us with a clever pun, "suddenly." This creates surprise because it deviates from our initial expectation, making us think about speed not in terms of physical motion in a mall but rather as temporal immediacy, something happening suddenly. Moreover, there's something inherently funny about attributing human characteristics, like swiftness, through naming, adding another layer to its comedic value by playing with cultural stereotypes related to Asian names and our English language homophones or associations. This joke exemplifies incongruity theory, where laughter arises when logical expectations are violated, along with elements from superiority theory suggesting we laugh at things which appear absurdly simple yet creative compared against our own thought process, making one feel intellectually superior upon understanding such witty correlation between words or phrases.
My grief counselor died. He was so good, I don't even care.
The humor in this joke is based on irony and the unexpected contradiction presented. A grief counselor's job is to help individuals cope with loss and sadness, so when a speaker says, "My grief counselor died," we would normally expect a reaction of sorrow or distress. However, the punchline, "He was so good, I don't even care," takes us by surprise as it contradicts our expectations. Instead of mourning his death like one typically would after losing someone they know, he seems unaffected, implying that his grief counselor did such an excellent job at teaching him how to handle loss that he doesn't feel any sadness about his passing away. This incongruity between what we anticipate, feeling sad due to death, versus what actually happens, indifference towards it, generates amusement because it challenges our usual understanding of emotional reactions towards demise, especially when related directly with someone who had been helping you deal with similar situations. Moreover, there's also a subtle self-referential aspect involved here. The joke itself becomes a testament for how well this hypothetical professional performed their duties, adding further depth into its comedic essence by making us laugh not just due to its ironic twist but also through appreciating such cleverly crafted tribute which essentially validates their skills posthumously. In essence, this jest utilizes elements from both incongruity theory, laughter arising from violation of logical expectations, along with situational irony where outcomes are contrary than intended results, amplifying overall hilarity factor upon realization.
What do you call a knight made entirely out of fine china? Ceramic.
The humor in this joke is derived from a pun, which is a clever form of wordplay that hinges on the multiple meanings or similar soundings of words for comedic effect. In this case, the name ceramic sounds very much like a ceramic, which aligns perfectly with the description provided, a knight made entirely out of fine china. In setting up the joke, it presents an absurd scenario, imagining a knight constructed not from metal armor but rather delicate porcelain materials. This already creates an amusing mental image due to its incongruity with our established understanding about knights and their typical gear. However, when we reach a punchline itself, ceramic, there's another layer added to amusement because it doesn't just match our expectation, a name appropriate for such unusual character, but also ties back wonderfully into initial premise through homophonic correlation between a ceramica and a ceramic. This unexpected connection brings forth laughter as we're delightfully surprised by how well these disparate elements, knighthood and pottery, have been linked together so seamlessly using linguistic creativity, making us appreciate ingenuity behind such humorous association while enjoying its playful twist upon conventional chivalrous naming conventions. Furthermore, since ceramic items are often associated with fragility unlike sturdy nature attributed towards knights traditionally, there's also subtle irony involved here where strength symbolized by knighthood gets juxtaposed against vulnerability implied through ceramic composition, adding further depth into overall hilarity factor via contrasting imagery evoked within listener's mind. Thusly does this jest employ elements from both pun-based humor along with incongruity theory, laughter arising when logical expectations get violated, complemented nicely by situational irony where outcomes contradict intended results.
My barber realized that his scissors weren't working, so he apologized. I replied, "Well, sorry's not gonna cut it."
The humor in this joke is derived from a clever use of idiomatic expression and pun. The phrase "sorry's not gonna cut it" is an English idiom which means that an apology isn't sufficient or acceptable as a solution to the problem at hand. However, in the context of this joke, there's also literal interpretation possible due to its barber setting. When the barber realizes his scissors aren't working properly and apologizes for it, he's acknowledging his inability to perform haircut, main service expected from him. However, when our speaker responds with "well, sorry's not gonna cut it," he isn't just expressing dissatisfaction towards mere verbal regret offered but also making humorous observation about actual situation. An apology won't indeed cut a hair, emphasizing futility behind such response given current circumstances through witty play on words. This double entendre, a word or phrase having two interpretations, forms core punchline here by exploiting multiple meanings associated with a cut, either reducing something into smaller parts using sharp instrument, like hair via scissors during trimming, or dismissing something as inadequate or unacceptable, like saying sorry without offering tangible remedy. Moreover, there's underlying sarcasm involved where speaker uses hyperbole for highlighting absurdity behind expecting apologies alone could somehow substitute proper tool functionality, creating another layer within comedic texture by mocking impractical expectations often encountered within real-life customer service interactions. Therefore does this jest utilize elements from both pun-based humor along with irony where outcomes contradict intended results complemented nicely by sarcastic tone adopted throughout narrative, amplifying overall hilarity factor upon realization.
My girlfriend asked me to sit down on the couch, and softly said I think we should talk. I don't think we should see each other anymore. I thought for a few moments, and finally said I understand. Then I walked to the doorway, and flipped off the lights.
The humor in this joke lies within the clever wordplay and unexpected twist. When the girlfriend says, "I don't think we should see each other anymore," it is typically understood as a phrase used to end a romantic relationship. However, instead of interpreting this statement in its conventional sense, our protagonist takes it literally. He responds by turning off the lights, an action that would indeed make them unable to see each other due to darkness. This act subverts our expectations and creates surprise because he chooses an unusual interpretation over common understanding of her statement, which adds comedic value through its absurdity. Moreover, his nonchalant reaction towards what usually would be distressing news, a breakup, further amplifies amusement factor by portraying him as someone who tackles emotionally charged situations with quirky logic rather than expected emotional responses, providing us with both comic relief from tension built up during initial part while also making us admire his unique way of handling tough conversations. This jest employs elements from linguistic ambiguity where phrases can have multiple interpretations depending upon how they are parsed or understood within their contexts along with situational irony where outcomes are contrary than intended results, enhancing overall hilarity factor upon realization. Well, that's it from this episode of Dad Jokes Explained. Hope these will give you inspiration in delivering your own dad jokes. I'm Graeme Klass and bye for now. This episode is produced by Classic Studios. See the show notes page for sources and credits. Check out our other podcasts in our network at classicstudios.com.